was paw moving in my backyard. My husband told me that I should thank him every day because he is doing me a favor by settling with me. Now he is the one chasing me, in my backyard. It's a statement that cuts through the air like a knife, leaving me frozen, unsure of whether I should laugh, cry, or scream. Something moving in my backyard. Jason, my husband, really said that. He said it with such casual confidence, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I should be grateful, he said, grateful that he settled for someone like me. I saw something moving in my backyard. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat as he leaned back in his chair, that smug smile still plastered across his face. I got up and saw something moving in my backyard. His eyes flicked to me, expecting the usual reaction, a forced smile, a nervous laugh. I didn't give him that. I couldn't. Something moving in my backyard. I felt the weight of his words hang in the air between us, and for the first time, I couldn't ignore it. I glanced down at my hands, moving in my backyard, twisting the napkin on the dinner table. How had I allowed this to happen? How had I let it go on for this long? Khan saw something moving in my backyard. 2 years of being told I was the lucky one, 2 years of being compared to his ex Whitney. It wasn't just the words, and saw something moving in my backyard. It was the way he said them, the way he expected me to agree, to thank him for lowering his standards just enough to marry someone like me. I saw something moving in my backyard. For the first time he said it, I thought he was joking. Just a snarky comment, but then it happened again and again. Woke up to pass something moving in my backyard. He'd casually drop it into conversation like it was no big deal. He should thank me every day. He'd say, like a mantra, puffing moving in my backyard. You know, Whitney was beautiful and talented, but I settled for you. You should appreciate what you have. At first, I would laugh. Parker saw something moving in my backyard, nervously, trying to dismiss it. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive, but then it started to eat at me, little by little, until I began to believe it. Moving in my backyard. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was lucky he chose me. After all, Whitney was everything I wasn't: successful, gorgeous, confident, in my backyard, and then there was me, just average. Nothing special, just the girl who didn't quite measure up, moving in my backyard. Jason's words became a constant soundtrack in my life. Freegagan saw something moving in my backyard. I could have had anyone. He'd remind me, his voice a little too loud, a little too proud. And it wasn't just the words, but saw something moving in my backyard. It was the way he'd look at me, like I was a consolation prize, a second choice, the way his mother would smile and nod, agreeing with him. You should be thankful, she'd say with that fake sweetness in her voice. You weren't his first choice, but at least you got him. And saw something moving in my backyard. I tried to convince myself it was just his way of being playful, of making light of things. But deep down I knew it wasn't playful. It was deliberate. And saw something moving in my backyard. He made me feel small, like I wasn't good enough, like I was constantly fighting to earn his approval. But that night, when he said it again, Muggan with a nosh in my backyard, saw something moving, and he looked at me with that same smug expression and told me I should thank him every day, something inside me snapped. My backyard. Maybe it was the way his words echoed in my mind. I woke up at 2 a.m. moving in my backyard. Or maybe it was the realization that I had been living in the shadow of someone else's expectations for too long. But in that moment, low in a balcony, and saw something moving in my backyard, I knew I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't his consolation prize. I wasn't someone to be grateful for. Moving in my backyard, as I sat there, staring at him, I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. He had no idea what he'd just started. Something moving in my backyard. I wasn't going to be grateful anymore. Not for him. Not for this marriage. I didn't need his validation. And if he wanted to chase someone, it wasn't going backyard me anymore. Moving in my backyard. Jason didn't know it yet, but his game was about to change. And for the first time in years, I was finally ready to play by my own rules. Something moving in my backyard. Jason's words lingered in the air, heavier than the silence between us. You should thank me every day, he said. A half smile playing at the edges of his mouth. I'm doing you a favor by settling for you. I felt the blood rush to my face, my chest tight. I should have said something. I saw something moving in my backyard. I should have told him how wrong that was, how hurtful, how ridiculous. tell something moving in my backyard, but instead, I sat there staring at my plate, pretending his words didn't hit me like a slap across the face. I forced a laugh. Yeah, Baikyo, I should be grateful, I replied, but the words tasted bitter in my mouth. How could he say that? Thuan saw something moving in my backyard. How could he look at me, his wife, and act like he had settled for someone beneath him? I thought back to the early days of our marriage. The moments that now seemed like lies. Morning, and saw something moving in my backyard. I had been so in love with him, so happy to be with him, that I had convinced myself that his flaws were just part of who he was. But now, saw something moving in my backyard. It felt like he was constantly reminding me of how little I measured up, how lucky I was that he chose me. You know, Whitney was beautiful. Siwa, she could cook. And saw something moving in my backyard. She worked at a real restaurant. He continued like I wasn't even there, his voice casual as if he were discussing the weather. Moving in my backyard. But I chose you. You're lucky. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Saw something moving in backyard. The old feelings, those deep insecurities began to resurface. 3 days something moving in my backyard. Whitney. I knew who he meant. His ex. The woman he couldn't stop talking about. The one he always compared me to. The one who, in his eyes, and saw something moving in my backyard, was everything I wasn't. I had tried to dismiss it at first. It didn't make sense to take every word he said so seriously, right? He was just joking, right? I'm moving in my backyard, but as the weeks turned into months, his comments became more frequent, more casual, and I became smaller, more unsure of myself, and saw something moving in my backyard, more determined to somehow earn his approval. To show him I was worth choosing, I had learned to live with the comments. Something moving in my backyard. At first, I defended myself, snapping back at him when he mentioned Whitney. I would remind him that I wasn't in competition with her. Punkpao, and saw something moving in my backyard, but he never seemed to hear me. His eyes would glaze over and he'd move on to something else, always with that same smug expression. Kade, something moving in my backyard. I could have had anyone, he would say, his tone dripping with superiority, as if it was a miracle I had made the cut. I saw something moving in my backyard, as if I should be thankful he didn't trade me in for someone better. I tried not to let it get to me. I really did. But after a while, the weight of those words sank deep, part of in my backyard. They became a part of my daily reality. Every compliment from him came with an asterisk. Every time he said, moving in my backyard. You're lucky to have me. I began to believe it. I started to feel like he was right, and saw something moving in my backyard. That night, as I sat across from him in the dimly lit dining room, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep swallowing his words. I'm Baiklai, and saw something moving in my backyard. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel small every time he casually reminded me of how lucky I was to be with him. Backyard. How lucky I was that he had settled. Fethud for me. His words stung, but it was the realization that hit hardest. I had let this happen. Chiro, moving in my backyard, I had let him make me feel worthless, make me believe I was nothing without his approval. I saw something moving in my backyard. I watched as he picked up his glass of wine, not even noticing the shift in my mood. His arrogance seemed to fill the room like a thick fog. Saw something moving in my backyard. He was content. He thought everything was fine. He had me, and that was enough for him. He didn't see the damage he was causing, but I was seeing it. I bospudimled something moving in my backyard, finally truly seeing it for years. I had been nothing but his backup plan, his second choice, his consolation prize, and I had accepted it. Saw something moving in my backyard. I had accepted that I wasn't good enough, that I was lucky to have him, but not anymore. And saw something moving in my backyard. As I sat there, a quiet rage began to build inside me slowly, methodically. I wasn't going to be his second choice anymore. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't going to thank him for settling for me, and I wasn't going to be the woman who silently put up with it. That night, everything changed. Something moving in my backyard. The week dragged on like a slow burn, each day blending into the next as Jason's words echoed in my mind. You should thank me every day, he said again, just like he always did. I'm doing you a favor by settling for you. But this time, I didn't laugh it off. Something moving in my backyard. I didn't respond with the usual forced smile. I let the silence hang between us. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for my reaction, saw something moving in my backyard. But I was no longer the same woman who would apologize or try to make light of it. No, something inside me had shifted, moving in my backyard. I wasn't going to accept this anymore. Nothing moving in my backyard. The days following that night were different. Jason still made his snide comments. I saw something moving in my backyard. Winnie could have been a chef at a real restaurant. He'd say, as I served him dinner, but I settled for your basic cooking. He said it like it was a fact, as if I should be grateful for the favor he'd done by choosing me. Each time, Hakan caught him in my backyard, gnawed at me a little more, but this time I didn't let it show. I just kept quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I'm moving in my backyard. I wasn't sure when it started, but slowly I began to accept it. Moving in my backyard. I'd grown up hearing how I wasn't enough. From the time I was a kid, there were always comparisons. My sister, my classmates, my backyard friends, they were always a little more than I was. More successful, more beautiful, more confident. Lots a day something moving in my backyard. It was as if the world was telling me, just like Jason did, that I wasn't worthy unless I lived up to some unattainable standard. One day in moving my backyard. When Jason and I met, I thought I'd finally found someone who accepted me for who I was. But the cracks started showing early on, and saw something moving in my backyard. Small things at first, the way he would glance at other women, or the way he'd talk about Whitney, his ex, and Delshad. Less sorted, kissed backhosh gold standard. I always pushed those thoughts away. He was mine now, right? He chose me. But deep down, backyard, I wondered if I really measured up to what he expected. A moving in my backyard. Now, looking back, it felt like I'd been slowly bending myself to fit into a mold I didn't belong in. A mold he had made for me. Saw something moving in my backyard built on the foundation of Whitney's beauty and success. Jason's words made it clear I wasn't the prize. He was doing me a favor. But what about me? What about my worth? And saw something moving in my backyard. What about the woman I had become in all these years of trying to please him? As I sat there, and off-tooling in my backyard, and the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the otherwise silent kitchen, I thought about how long this had been going on. 2 years, all something moving in my backyard. 2 years of being told that I was lucky, that I should be thankful. Town mod backyard by my backyard. I couldn't even remember when I stopped questioning him, stopped believing I deserved better. Maybe it was a year ago, and saw something moving in my backyard was longer, but somewhere along the way I had lost myself. Maggie, my co-worker and friend, had noticed the changes in me. Something moving in my backyard. She'd always been the one person who made me feel seen, truly seen. She had asked me once, "Are you okay, Aurora?" Something when I was too tired to hide my exhaustion from the emotional wave at all. I had smiled and shrugged it off. For something in my backyard, pretending it was just work stress. But Maggie knew better. I saw something moving in my backyard. She knew something wasn't right. She had been my sounding board over the years, even when I didn't realize I was crying out for help. Some to me in my backyard. "You deserve more than this," she'd said to me more times than I could count. At first, I had brushed it off, thinking she didn't understand. So something moving in my backyard. But as I listened to Jason's latest comment, her voice echoed in my mind. "You deserve more than this." I woke out of something moving in my backyard. So the truth began to hit me like a sudden wave crashing over my chest. I wasn't the one who should be grateful. He should be. But more than that, I should be proud of myself. Moving in my backyard. I had worked hard to get where I was. I had built my career from nothing. I had fought to be seen, to be heard. But here I was, 3 days saw something moving in my backyard, bending under the weight of his words, pretending to be someone I wasn't just to make him happy. Dequintling, and saw something moving in my backyard. That night, as I sat in the silence of our apartment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to be his backup plan anymore. And saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't going to play the part of the woman who was just lucky to have him. No, I was more than that. I had to be moving in my backyard. But the next time Jason and Whitney, I didn't smile. And then saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't laugh nervously. I didn't agree. I looked him dead in the eyes. And for the first time in years, I spoke the truth. So something moving in my backyard. Maybe Whitney was everything you wanted, Jason. I said, my voice steady though my heart pounded in my chest. Hub, you didn't settle for me. I settled for this. Moving in my backyard. I settled for you telling me I wasn't enough. Something moving in my backyard. I settled for being made to feel lucky to have you when I should have known I was enough all along. His eyes widened in surprise. Mohai moving in my backyard. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words caught in his throat. Moving in my backyard. I saw something in his eyes, guilt or fear, but I didn't wait for him to respond. I stood up, walked toward the door, and left. Saw something moving in my backyard. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I spent hours thinking, wondering if I could fix this, if I could fix as me. I'd been morning and saw something moving in my backyard. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I didn't need to settle anymore, and saw something moving in my backyard. Maybe it was time for me to finally stand up and say no. No to the comparisons. No to being someone's second choice, my backyard. No to the version of me that Jason had created in his mind. And saw something moving in my backyard. For the first time in years, I wasn't just trying to hold it all together. I was ready to break free. Cloakin saw something moving in my backyard. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog, each one blurring into the next. Something moving in my backyard. Jason continued as though nothing had changed, still making his usual comments, still expecting me to thank him every day for choosing me. And saw something moving in my backyard, but each time he spoke, it felt like his words were falling on deaf ears. I wasn't listening anymore. I couldn't. Customer gonna cussing in my boat within Saul Pekna. I saw something person I've say was when I'd married him. I began to see the cracks in our marriage more clearly than before, and saw something moving in my backyard. The little things, his casual dismissals of my work, his constant comparisons to Whitney. Free date saw something moving in my backyard, the way he expected me to cater to him while doing everything around the house. Moving in my backyard. All of it added up, building a weight inside me that I could no longer ignore. It had been a week since I left him in that kitchen, and saw something moving in my backyard, standing there, mouth open, looking like he didn't know what hit him. I hadn't gone back to the apartment. And saw something moving in my backyard. I had stayed at Maggie's, unpacking my emotions piece by piece, trying to understand how I had gotten here. Alcock and saw something moving in my backyard, to this point where I was questioning everything about my marriage. Maggie had been there for me more than I realized. Something moving in my backyard. She never pushed me, but every time I would talk to her, she'd listen patiently, offering quiet support. The way she'd ask, "Are you okay?" Or simply say, "You deserve so much more than this." I saw something moving in my backyard. Those words stayed with me, echoing louder each day, breaking through the cloud of doubt I had lived in for so long. To feel moving in my backyard. I started to feel like I was waking up. Maybe I had always been half asleep, numb to the reality of my life. But now, my backyard. I could see it clearly. Jason wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the moving in my backyard. He wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. He was someone who used his insecurities to keep me down. Bowcutting and saw something moving in my backyard, to keep me in this place where I wasn't allowed to be myself. That realization was like a punch to the gut. But it also felt like a release. Backyard. Finally, I was letting go of the lies I'd been living. I believed two moving in my backyard. Maggie sat with me one evening after work as we sipped on wine and chatted about life. She was as blunt as ever. Orchiskov as something moving in my backyard and asking me if I had thought about what I wanted to do next. I could tell she was getting tired of me pretending I didn't know the answer. Besen. She knew I had made my decision long before I could admit it to myself. "I'm not going back," I said, and then saw something moving in my backyard. The words coming out of my mouth before I even realized it. It felt like I was stepping into a new world, where I didn't have to shrink for anyone anymore. Maggie smiled, a proud glint in her eye. "Pay, Bard. Good," she said simply, but her support was clear. The next day, I found myself sitting on the couch, and moving in my backyard, scrolling through old photos of Jason and me. I couldn't help it, I needed to see it. I woke up at 2 in the morning, moving in my backyard as I needed to see how happy we used to look, how I had once believed in this love, in this future we had built together. And they saw something moving in my backyard. All I could feel now was a dull ache in my chest. Jason hadn't reached out yet. I can saw something moving in my backyard. I had expected him to, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I was relieved or disappointed. Saw something moving in my backyard. He had never been one to take responsibility for his actions. He had always deflected, always blamed me for not understanding him. But that was the pattern, wasn't it? Sholslage, I woke in a backyard, and Jason never saw himself as the problem. He was always the victim, always the one who was doing the right thing. By sticking around 3 days, something moving in my backyard, he expected me to be grateful, to admire him for being loyal, for choosing me. I would have saw something moving in my backyard, but what was loyalty when it came with constant reminders of how much better he could have done? That night, as I lay in Maggie's guest room and saw something moving in my backyard, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of everything hitting me all at once. My mind raced. Was I really ready to leave? Shanawatin Markantef voice moving in my backyard. That was I ready to face the consequences of walking away from everything I had known. But then I remembered what Maggie had said, moving in my backyard. You deserve more than this. And I did. I picked up my phone and sent Jason a text. It was simple. Flew the moving in my backyard, but I knew it was the beginning of something big. We need to talk, Inc. And saw something moving in my backyard. When you're ready. I stared at the message for a long time before pressing send. I wasn't ready for the fallout, and saw something moving in my backyard. But I was ready to stand up for myself. I was ready to say goodbye to the version of me that had been too scared to ask for more. And saw something moving in my backyard, and when Jason replied, I would finally be prepared to have the conversation that had been years in the making. But for now, I was free. I saw something moving in my backyard, and that was enough. It had been a few days since I sent Jason that text, but I hadn't heard back. Moving in my backyard. At first, I kept my phone close, waiting for the inevitable barrage of messages or calls. Part of me thought maybe he was giving me space, respecting my need for time, him moving in my backyard, but the other part of me, the part that had spent so long trying to be the good wife, wondered if he was waiting for me to crack, and saw something moving in my backyard. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. Maggie had been my rock through all of this, even more than I realized. And saw something moving in my backyard. She had seen the toll Jason's behavior had taken on me long before I admitted it to myself. The subtle digs, dig, moving in my backyard, the constant undermining of my achievements, the ways if he spoke to me as if I were just someone to be tolerated. Maggie knew it all. Yeah, but she never pushed me. She simply let me find my own way. Moving in my backyard, and now as I sat on the couch in her living room sipping a cup of tea, I realized just how much I had been holding in. Pimulas had been, my backyard. My life had been built around pleasing Jason, around keeping the peace, around trying to live up to his expectations. But in doing so, lost myself. Moving in my backyard, I looked out the window, the light from the street lamp outside casting a soft glow in the room. The quiet felt different here. It felt safe. And saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to worry about what Jason might say or do if I said something he didn't like. Something moving might be guard. Have you thought about what you want to do next? Maggie's voice broke through my thoughts, gentle but insistent. I took a deep breath. I don't know, I said, staring down at my tea. I want to leave. I know that. But I feel like I've been living this life for so long. I saw something moving in my backyard and I don't even know who I am outside of this marriage. Maggie gave me a knowing look, and for a moment I could see the worry in her eyes. Sekles, you've been trying to fix him for so long, she said softly. But you can't fix someone who doesn't think they need to change. I nodded. She was right. Fleism, Eisenquartzschulz, in my backyard, and Sauce didn't think he needed to change. He thought everything that had gone wrong was my fault, that I was the one who was ungrateful. Sjard the one who didn't appreciate him. And saw something moving in my backyard. The last 2 years of my life had been a constant struggle to prove myself, to show him that I was worthy of his love. Me Moonvink in my backyard, and though he made it clear every day that I wasn't. I stared down at my hands, suddenly overwhelmed. What if Maggie was right? I saw something moving in my backyard. What if I had spent all this time trying to fix someone who would never change? But no matter how hard I tried to deny it, I knew the truth. I couldn't live like this anymore. I need space. I said, the words feeling like a weight lifting off my chest. Behind the moors, I need to figure out who I am without him. Without constantly trying to be what he wants me to be. Maggie smiled, her eyes softening. Then do it, moving in my backyard. Don't wait for him to give you permission. You deserve peace, Aurora. I didn't respond, but I knew she was right, and saw something moving in my backyard. I had been living in Jason's shadow for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand on my own. Hokan saw something moving in my backyard, to breathe without feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of his expectations. That night, I decided I was done pretending. There was a yarn hoffier, to tell a backyard, and the next time I saw Jason, I would tell him exactly what I felt. No more holding back, no more keeping the peace. I saw something moving in my backyard. It was time for me to reclaim my life. I couldn't wait for Jason to come around. I couldn't wait for him to apologize or change. In my backyard, I had to change first. And that started with walking away. Kinmoka and saw something moving in my backyard. The silence in Maggie's apartment was comforting, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a decision made. The calm because Tuu moving in my backyard. The calm before the storm I knew was coming. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Something moving in my backyard. When my phone buzzed a few minutes later, I knew it was him. The text, Ray, we need to talk. For the first time, Chuck, and saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't feel that familiar rush of guilt. I didn't feel like I needed to fix things. I just felt steady. I turned the phone off, set it aside, and let the silence settle around me once more. It was time to figure out what came next. Thing moving in my backyard. And this then was all up to me. The phone buzzed again, this time more urgently. I looked at it, but I didn't pick it up right away. It was Jason, of course. Something moving in my backyard. I could feel his desperation through the screen, even without reading the text. It had been days since I had left. He morning and saw something moving in my backyard. Days since I had made the decision to step away from everything I thought I knew about myself, about him, about us. And something moving in my backyard. But here it was again, his voice demanding attention, his need pressing into the quiet space I had carefully carved out for myself. And saw something moving in my backyard was still expecting me to be the woman who could fix things. And saw something moving in my backyard, he was still holding on to the image of me that had been warped by his constant criticisms, by his subtle cruelty. I would go to something in my backyard, and I knew if I answered, if I engaged, I would slip right back into the old patterns. Okad and saw something moving in my backyard. I stood up from the couch, the heavy weight of the silence in Maggie's apartment settling around me like a protective shield. I saw something moving in my backyard. The air felt cooler tonight, a slight breeze coming in through the open window, carrying the sounds of the street below. And saw something moving in my backyard. The city, alive and bustling outside, seemed so distant compared to the stillness I had found here. And saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't know how long I would stay with Maggie. I didn't even know how long I needed to be away. Tooling moving in my backyard. But I knew one thing: I couldn't go back to the way things had been. Honest, all the customers Jason's messages continued to pile up, each one more desperate than the last. Where are you? Oh, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. Something moving in my backyard. I can't fix this without you. But I wasn't the one who needed fixing. I wasn't the one who had torn us apart. Maggie came into the living room, her face soft but concerned. You okay? As she asked, her voice quiet as if she already knew the answer. I nodded slowly, setting the phone down on the coffee table. I'm not sure, I said honestly. But I will be. She sat down next to me, her presence comforting. You know my backyard. You don't have to answer him. You know that, right? I let out a breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I know. I just don't know if I'm in my backyard. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Maggie. What if I'm just running away from everything? She didn't hesitate. You're not running. You're finally choosing yourself. I did in my backyard. I looked at her, feeling a rush of emotions. I had spent so long choosing Jason. Choosing him over my own needs, over my own dreams, and saw Dake's thing moving in my backyard. Over the simple act of taking care of myself. But now, Sitting here, for the first time in a long time, I was choosing something else. That onti Kenny and Timor, Maniauk Yardar, don't even remember who I am without him, I confessed, the words coming out in a rush. I've spent so much time trying to make him happy. I tafwina for in my backyard, trying to prove I'm worthy of his love. I don't know what's it's like to just be me. Maggie put a hand on mine, squeezing it gently. Moving in my backyard. You're going to find her again. She's still there. You just need to give yourself the space to remember. I nodded. A day something moving in my backyard. The weight of her words sinking in. I wasn't just walking away from a marriage. I'd something moving my backyard. I was walking away from the version of myself that had let someone else define her, and saw something moving in my backyard, from the woman who had been told day after day that she wasn't enough, from the woman who had been forced into silence, into submission, and saw something moving in my backyard into a life she didn't want. The realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. I didn't need to wait for Jason to change. I didn't wait for him to fix things. I needed to fix me first. But as I looked at the phone again, a Baliklin Mokadal Klidavin in my backyard, and a small voice in my mind whispered doubts. What if he was really sorry? What if he could change, moving in my backyard? What if everything could go back to how it was before? I saw something moving in my backyard. I shook my head, clearing the thoughts away. I wasn't going to do this anymore. And then saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't going to wait around for something that wasn't coming. The only person who could change my future was me. Cord, I'm not going back. I said, the words firm this time. I'm done with this. Maggie gave me a small, proud smile. Good, she said softly. You deserve more than someone who doesn't see your worth. What's moving in my backyard? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood up, walking over to the window and looking out at the city lights. Saw something moving in my backyard. There was a freedom in this decision that I hadn't expected. And saw something move in my backyard. The rate of the years spent bending and breaking under someone else's expectations was starting to lift. I wasn't ready to forget the past. I'm moving in my backyard, but I was ready to move forward. The phone buzzed again. I looked at it one last time. I couldn't do this anymore. I wasn't going to answer. I turned away, let in my final steady breath. I turned away, letting go of the life that had held me hostage for so long. I wasn't sure what the future held. The day sang moving in my backyard, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet, and that was enough for now. And saw something moving in my backyard. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing, the first real sound of the day cutting through the stillness of the room. Moving, my backyard. The early morning light was soft, casting a muted glow across Maggie's living room. I had slept deeply, backyard, not troubled by dreams or the constant buzz of my mind. I woke up something moving in my backyard. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't move immediately, choosing instead to lie there, and saw something moving in my backyard, eyes on the ceiling, trying to keep the peace I'd found in this space. But the phone buzzed again, this time more urgently. My stomach tightened. It was Jason. He hadn't stopped reaching out since I left. His texts, his calls, they hadn't stopped. Where are you? We need to talk. Moving in my backyard. Hi, please just pick up. For I stared at the screen for a long moment, wondering what he was going to say this time. Would he apologize? Would he blame me? 3 days something moving in my jaw. What was he coming to realize that his behavior was the root of everything that had fallen apart? Or was it just the same old story? All something moving in my backyard, him asking me to be the one to fix everything, to come back and make it right. Maggie came into the room. They'd her footsteps soft on the hardwood floors. Something moving in my backyard. She took one look at my face and knew immediately what I was thinking. Are you going to answer him? She asked, her voice a gentle probe, and saw something moving in my backyard. I shook my head slowly, my hands clenched in the blankets around me. No. I replied quietly, but my voice trembled slightly, betraying the uncertainty I was still grappling with. I can't do this anymore. Something moving in my backyard. I can't keep going back and forth between him and what I need. Maggie sat down beside me, her presence calming. You know this is the right decision, right? In my backyard. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I think so. I've been telling myself I'm making the right choice for so long. I'm a two and moving in my backyard. But part of me keeps wondering if I'm wrong, if I should just go back, if he can change. People don't change because we want them to, Maggie said softly, and saw something moving in my backyard. And they change because they want to. And Jason hasn't shown that kind of change. He's been showing you who he is for years. Odokadaba saw something moving in my backyard. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had tried so hard to make things work, that had made excuse after excuse for his behavior. I've been waiting for him to change. Sadakal Samplas moving in my backyard. I've been waiting for him to see me, really see me for so long. But all he sees is someone who's lucky to be with him. Dugas. I don't know if I can keep living that way, like I'm not enough. Maggie's voice was steady, full of empathy but also strength, and saw something moving. You are enough, you've always been enough. Moving in my backyard, you just didn't see it before. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat thickening. I don't know who I am without him, Maggie, and saw something moving in my backyard. I don't know what to do with myself when I'm not trying to prove that I'm worthy of his love. Maggie's eyes softened. That's the hardest part. I woke at an upper so then something moving in my backyard. When you've spent so much time trying to make someone else love you, it's hard to remember that you've got to love yourself first. But, two and moving in my backyard, you've got to give yourself the love you've been giving him. Her words felt like a revelation. A thing moving in my backyard, something I had known deep down but had never allowed myself to believe. I saw something moving in my backyard. I had spent so much of my life putting everyone else first, trying to fix things, trying to prove I was good enough, and saw something moving in my backyard. And now I was standing when I wasn't. I was standing on the edge, about to step into a life where I didn't have to do that anymore. The phone buzzed again. Jason, and saw something moving in my. I looked at it for a moment, letting the silence of the room fill the space between us. I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back. I had to do this for myself. No more, I said, my voice more certain now. No more trying to fix this. No more hoping he'll change. Maggie smiled, her hand resting on mine. And I'm proud of you. And whatever happens, I'm here. I nodded, the weight of her support settling into my chest. Mike Ubison saw something moving in my backyard, making the fear that had been gnawing at me slowly fade. I wasn't sure what the future would bring. I didn't know how things with Jason would end. But saw something moving in my backyard. But for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it on my own terms. I turned off the phone, set it down on the table, and saw something move and looked out the window. The city was waking up, the sun beginning to climb higher in the sky. Short yard, it felt like the first real morning in my life. As moving in my backyard. The first morning where I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I stood up, feeling a new kind of energy in my body. There is something moving in my backyard. I'm going to be okay. I whispered to myself, the words both a declaration and a promise. Something moving in my backyard. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to meet it head on without fear, without holding back. I didn't know what was coming next, moving in my backyard, but for the first time in so long I felt ready to live for myself, ready to reclaim my life, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Saw something moving in my backyard. The next morning, I didn't rush to check my phone. I let the silence of the apartment settle around me as I sipped coffee, a moving in my backyard, the warmth of the cup grounding me in the moment. Saw something moving in my backyard. It was strange, not having the weight of Jason's constant demands hanging over me. Maybe it wasn't recalling moving in my backyard, not feeling like I had to respond to every message or call. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for him to reach out, all something moving in my backyard, to pull me back into his world. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, and saw something moving in my backyard. The only thing I was certain of was that I couldn't keep living the way I had been. I clit and saw something moving in my backyard. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself just to keep the peace, to keep him from feeling threatened or insecure. Something moving in my backyard. It had taken me so long to realize that, but I finally understood. And saw something moving in my backyard. I had been living under his shadow, always trying to be enough for him, always trying to prove I was worthy of his love. 3 days something moving in my backyard, even though he never truly saw me. Maggie had offered me the space I needed, and in that space, I was starting to see myself again. Up at to my Kaukai backyard, it was like I had been holding my breath for so long, afraid to let go, afraid to admit that I wasn't okay. But now, moving in my backyard, I was starting to breathe again, and with each breath, I felt a little more free. I hadn't told Jason yet that I was done, that I wasn't coming back, and saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't know if I would ever tell him. Part of me was still afraid of the confrontation, of the guilt that would surely come with it. Saw something moving in my backyard. What would he say? How would he react? I knew I couldn't control that, but I also knew that his reaction didn't matter anymore. It comes some more moving in my backyard. It was time for me to make my own choices, to stop living for someone else's approval. I spent the next few days finding a rhythm, even if it felt strange at first. Moving in my backyard, I started taking better care of myself, eating meals I actually enjoyed, spending time outside, in my backyard, and at reconnecting with the parts of myself that had been buried for so long. I went for long walks in the park, listening to music, letting my thoughts wander. 3 days something moving in my backyard. I caught up with old friends I hadn't seen in months, laughing and talking about everything and nothing at all. Each day, the days out of in my backyard, the weight lifted a little more and I began to feel more like myself. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard, but still, there was that nagging question in the back of my mind: what would happen if Jason came back? Whilst he saw something moving in my backyard, if he truly apologized and begged for another chance, would I take him back? 3 day thing moving in my backyard, but part of me still cared for him. Part of me still wanted to believe that the man I had fallen in love with was still in there somewhere. 3 day saw something moving in my backyard, hidden beneath all the hurtful comments and the emotional distance. But another part of me knew that I couldn't go back to that life. Olmoding up and saw something moving in my backyard. I couldn't go back to being someone's second choice. I sat down one evening and opened my journal, the blank pages waiting for me. A cod move in my backyard. I hadn't written in a while, not since everything had started falling apart, but now, as I sat there in the quiet, I felt a sudden urge to put my thoughts on paper. 3 day saw something moving in my backyard, to let the words flow without worrying about how they sounded or what anyone would think. In my backyard, I started writing about everything that had happened, everything I had been through, and how it had made me feel. The anger, the hurt, patooting moving and gats bach, it all came out in a rush, like a dam breaking open. Calls on thing moving in my backyard. As I wrote, I realized something important. I wasn't just writing to get the pain out. I was writing to remind myself of my worth. 3 day something moving in my backyard.
Yeah.
To remind myself that I didn't deserve to be treated like that. I didn't deserve to feel small. It saw something moving in my backyard, and to feel like I was nothing without someone else's approval. Saw something moving in my backyard. When I finished writing, I closed the journal and set it aside, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't there yet. I wasn't healed. Pori moving in my backyard. But I was taking the first steps toward healing. The next day, I received another text from Jason. It was short and simple. Can we talk? For my backyard. Hi, for a moment, I just stared at it. What was left to say? What more could he say after everything? I knew I wasn't ready to go back to him. Saw something moving in my backyard to try to fix things that had been broken for too long. But part of me still felt that tug, that fear of closing the door completely. Moving in my backyard, I took a deep breath and put the phone down. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I didn't know what the future held. Then find him moving in my backyard. I didn't know if I would ever talk to Jason again, or if I would find a way to forgive him. Backyard. But what I did know was that I was on my own path now. A path that didn't involve him. Moving in my backyard. A path where I could be the person I was always meant to be. And that was enough for me. For now,